Hello again. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 16 here for SEC Baseball Weekly, our weekly show. Sorry, we are a little later getting out this week. Yours truly has been sick all week. Got a special show for you today. We got our first guest, Jeff Dantzler, who's covered Georgia baseball for approximately 30 years. We'll talk about the Bulldogs, their rise in the SEC under Wes Johnson, just the changes in the league. Jeff has offed himself quickly, but he'll be back in a minute, I'm sure. Alfred Ezman joins me. Graham Doty joins me as always. Gentlemen, good to have you guys on today. Graham, I'll have you start us off with telling everyone about our sponsor.
Sure, yeah. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head over to our online casino and get an in-game blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo BLEAV for 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online. The game starts here.
All right, we got Jeff back with us, but Alfred, tell us what else is on the docket for today's show other than talking some Georgia and SEC baseball with Jeff.
Yeah, afterwards, we have, obviously, there's been space in between our last show and now due to the MLB Draft. We didn't cover the portal at all when we did our draft reaction last week, so we got a lot of moves to go over in that score, as well as some, conference tournaments, as some invitational tournaments out in Texas with some SEC teams in them. So more to look forward to at the beginning of next season in 2025. We'll get down to that and just even more portal moves that have been made by teams around the league.
All right. Jeff is with us now. We'll start our interview with him. Jeff has covered Georgia baseball for how many years now?
Going back to, I guess I became full-time play-by-play announcer in 1995. So it's been a long time. Grizzled veteran.
You missed the national title by a few years, right?
I did. I was in high school then, yeah. So interestingly, then I was actually working on Georgia Southern broadcasts. I grew up in Statesboro. Georgia Southern made the College World Series that year in 1990. So that was a long time ago.
Of course, you almost caught one. Was it 2008, the Fresno State season, I think? Yeah, Georgia had a really good team. Of course, has been back. It's a program with, Georgia's got so much talent in that state, just within the Atlanta area alone. Georgia's had a lot of history of success, and the consistency has been the issue. But, Jeff, it feels like maybe Wes Johnson has hit on some things. Tremendous season in his first year in Athens. The Bulldogs hit the transfer portal hard once again, I think, for this coming season. It seems like Wes Johnson has got things headed in the right direction there in Athens.
I would agree with it. Wes brought in a lot of energy, and I just think the SEC background was tremendous. He was the pitching coach for LSU's national championship team the year prior, and had been at Mississippi State and Arkansas. So he's been to Omaha, the regionals and super regionals, and has been a part of these huge weekly series in the SEC. And also he spent a couple of years with the Minnesota Twins when they won American League Central titles and has been in the playoffs. So I think with that, and Dave Johnson, who's done the games with me now for 25 years, we talk about it. I mean, these weekend games in the league are just, they're fun, but they're so excruciating because they're all so big, because everybody's trying to get to that 15 wins. Because I think, Mississippi State showed in 2013, they went 15-15, played for the national title. Ole Miss in 22 goes 14-16 and wins the national championship. So all of a sudden you start realizing if we can just get enough to get in, if you get good enough to be 500 in this league, you're good enough to get to Omaha. So I think with that, just the pressure of those games is huge. But I think knowing how big that is with Wes, and then being able to balance that out with him being a part of the 162 game schedules in the big leagues, he's kept things light and loose. Every day is a new day. So I think everything he's done, he's pushed the right buttons, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around the program right now.
When you look at Georgia, This past season, Jeff, one of the stories of really college baseball, Charlie Condon, highest draft pick ever in program history. When did you realize, okay, this kid is phenomenal and is special?
Probably the first weekend he played, very famously. I don't want to go too deep into this. He redshirted as a freshman and just really burst onto the scene. But just a tremendous young man with a great family, as great a player as he is. He's an even better kid off the field. I mean, the Terry College of Business is very prestigious here at the university. That they would have laughed me out of there. He got in at the end of his second year here at Georgia. That's the most excited I ever saw him. But he was completely grounded. He was a great teammate. And you could just see as time went on that he was the great player who produced on the big stage. And I think just to give you an example of that, in 2 years of playing 10 SEC series per year, 20 SEC series, he hit at least one home run in 19 of those 20 SEC series. So that's really producing when the chips are down. And I think when you look at the draft these last few years, you've seen not only more and more college guys, but more and more SEC guys. I mean, think about Skeens and Cruz last year from LSU. I think the scouts are understanding that these guys, when they get to the majors, they have played not only in pressure-packed games, but in games much more pressure-packed than most regular season Major League Baseball games are. You know, you get a super regional at SEC Stadium, you go play at Omaha, or heck, you get LSU, Mississippi State, or Ole Miss and Arkansas. Those games are enormous. And if you can handle the pressure for that, to me, that's a very good indicator that you'll be able to handle the pressure of the big leagues.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll build off that. Condon obviously was picked third overall by the Rockies in this past draft. The challenge I think Georgia faces a little is kind of coming in and replacing them. Has there been anything in the portal you've noticed that's gotten them back on the right path? Because all signs are pointing to hitting talent will return, but I think it might be a challenge in and of itself just to replace what Condon done. But what are your thoughts on what they've done to do that?
Yeah, he's a generational talent, and we've had a lot of great players here at Georgia. And I would put from the ones I've called, Jeff Keppinger, Gordon Beckham, and Charlie at the top of the list. So you don't replace a guy like that. And we lost a couple of other really good ball players, Corey Collins and Fernando Gonzalez. So, yeah, to me, it still goes back to you've got to have your core be your homegrown guys, and you plug the holes with the portal players. And that was a situation with Georgia last year. And of course, there can be some exceptions out there. But I think for Georgia this coming year, it's going to be those returning players that can show the way. And probably the best of those is Tre Phelps, who was a freshman All-American last year. But I've just found in sports, whenever there's a great player, like, for instance, in football, obviously we lose Brock Bowers to the draft. Well, Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky are the next two guys at tight end. So you're not going to be Brock Bowers. Be the best Oscar you can be. Be the best Lawson you can be. And I think the same thing goes for the Georgia baseball team looking ahead to next year. And there are some very nice additions with the portal and coming in out of high school. But it's going to be you just be the best that you can be. And that should be good enough, you know, just to get you in the mix. And I think all we're hoping for in the league, every coach out there would probably tell you secretly, you give me 15 and 15 right now, you get me in a regional, I'll take it. If you can do one or two better than that, that means you're hosting. You definitely sign up for that.
Yeah, Phelps was the next guy I was going to ask you about, Jeff, because I think he spent a little bit of time hurt, but it seemed like he hit when he was healthy. And is he a draft eligible sophomore maybe?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
But he is. We kind of dubbed him. Dave and I dubbed him Mr. Electric. He's got that natural juice to him, and it's one of those deals where he just plays with such confidence. It's a natural swagger, but it's not cockiness. He's a great kid, and I think one of the things you certainly see in college athletics, it made it a much easier transition for him last year because he was surrounded by veterans. So now he's going to go into that real leading role amongst the position players. And you know, there are going to be a lot of new faces coming in. And one thing that Wes did this past season was he played different guys at different positions. I mean, Charlie played first, third, and all three outfield positions. And I think a lot of that, this goes back to what we were talking about, just having that SEC experience. Those first 4 weeks, you really need to get settled on what your core is and who your guys are. in years past, and this goes for any team, and I know some years where I've gotten worried, say 2, 3, 4 weeks in, when you feel like you're still having tryouts and you're into the teeth of SEC play, you're in trouble. Now, sometimes circumstances are thrust on you through injuries, but for the most part, you better know what that pitching staff is, and you better know what that lineup is and who your guys are. Because if you're trying to figure it out in the league, that's like trying to learn how to drive at the Daytona 500.
Jeff, I want to ask you about Ron Polk. My wife is a state grad, so like her family loves him. You had him for 2 years at Georgia. He takes you to Omaha. What's your favorite Ron Polk story when he was the head coach of Georgia?
Oh, I love Coach Polk, and he always kind of gravitated to me because, again, he coached at Georgia Southern before he was at Mississippi State back in the 70s, and actually took them to the College World Series. And their sports information director was a legendary Claude Felton, who, of course, was our longtime SID at Georgia since 1979. He just retired. And Georgia Southern's radio announcer, Nate Hurst, was one of my mentors. So we had some good connections. And when he stepped down from state the first time, he was a scout and was a head coach for Team USA. So we'd come to Athens. We'd see him all the time. But just in our 2 years, one of the things that was great about Coach Polk, if I needed to run by his hotel room, he would give me the lineup the night before. There was nothing too secretive about it. But I think maybe my favorite story was after he left, and we've kept in contact, and I love Coach Polk, and I was as happy for him and Jim Ellis and Joe Deere as I was for anyone when State won it. But this was about 7, 8 years ago at the SEC tournament. Dave Johnson and I were sitting in Birmingham, and he popped in the booth, and I said, "Here you go, Coach, put on the headset." And we start going through the scholarship limitations, everything about that. And I wanted to kind of have him on for another half. He go, "Oh, you know what I say about the NCAA? No clue about anything." Took the headphones off and dropped it. So Dave and I are like, "Yeah, that was an epic mic drop moment." But when you talk about Coach Polk, he truly is the godfather of SEC baseball. I think it's one of the great crimes of all time that he doesn't have a national championship. But everything that this league is, he was the guy who built it. He was the guy who got it started. He was the guy who had the vision, who knew this could be a big deal. And I know how proud he is, gosh, when he's at his ballpark in Starkville. But I think he knows that when you got great crowds in Athens and Baton Rouge and Knoxville, he is the guy who got it started. I mean, Skip Bertman had said, when he got the LSU job the first time they went to Omaha, I said, maybe one day I'll be as famous as Ron Polk. And I remember Skip saying when he said there were people in Baton Rouge that were still calling runs points. And now, you look at just it's the greatest atmosphere that there is. But he was definitely the godfather and the guy who got all this going. And I'm a cigar smoker too, so we had a little sign, no smoking at Foley Field, and our sports information director Chris Lakos made a little addendum underneath that said "Except Coach Polk." So when he'd come up for the post game, he was allowed to have his cigars.
That's awesome. If you go to a state game now, Jeff, there's a section in the ballpark where it's nothing but Ron Polk merchandise, and everything has a cigar on it to this day.
It's epic. When he got the job back, I guess what was that in 2007? Yeah, and because let's see, he went back to state in 2002 because that was Coach Perno's first year. I'm just trying to do the math on that, but anyways, there was a T-shirt. I bought a T-shirt out there, and it said "The Big Dog is back," and his name is Ron, and it had Bully smoking a cigar. So he is. I hope he's getting some royalties on that because he told me one of his friends went through and said, "Coach, how many cigars do you smoke a day?" And he's, I don't know, 6, 8, 10. And he went back and did the math. He said, "I figured in your lifetime, you've spent $600,000 on cigars." Jeez. That was a good investment. Hey, what you enjoy. But I love Coach Polk.
Did you make his card list? Like, do you get the 3 cards every year? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. He calls.
Birthday, wedding anniversary, Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas and birthday for sure. And, my wife's beautiful. She's 12 years younger than me, sometimes 11, basically 11 and a half. Jeff, you really outputted your coverage, big guy. And, he always comments, oh, you've put on a lot of weight. She must be a really good cook. So I want to make sure anytime I know I'm going to see him, and I try and work out every day, but I really try and, eat extra better and get extra workouts in, because I know it's coming if I put on a couple of pounds.
Jeff, I'll swing it back for another Starkville connection, kind of in the player realm here. A guy who's coming back, Slade Alford. He had an unbelievable year after spending time at Mississippi State. 300 average, 17 home runs. The power was there. 69 RBIs, 80 hits. He was just, he was another guy, I guess, because Condon was there and there was a lot of other bats there. Flew under the radar at times. Not that he didn't have his games, but I think that the impact he'll make will just be bigger this next year. Talk about Slate and what he did this past season and what we could see in 2025.
Yeah, I think Slate's another one of those guys who was a very good supporting actor to the Charlie Condon, really Corey Collins show. Corey Collins led the nation on base percentage and wound up with 46 career home runs at Georgia. So I think Slate moving into one of those leading roles. And another big thing for him is going to be finding him a position. And if my alarm clock just went off. If he's comfortable, I think he's more of a corner infielder, or maybe even if he's the DH. He played a lot of second last year, and actually, as the year went on, he improved some there. I think Georgia probably like to get a little bit better range there. Slate would be the first to tell you he's not the fastest guy in the world, but Wes and the staff did an exceptional job this past year, and you guys know how it is, and especially year one. To get the pitching together, trying to cobble together a roster, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of something. And we probably sacrificed a little bit on defense. It's not going to be perfect coming in year one. So I think maybe finding Slade a home, and who knows, maybe he plays first base. I don't know, but he does have a very good bat. Georgia was very good 1 through 9 in the lineup last year. So I'll be interested to see where he settles in. And, the other thing we've seen, Corey and Charlie hit 1-2 for us. And, traditionally, definitely what I grew up with, I'm a lot older than you guys. It was you hit your best guy third, your fastest guy lead off, the guy who can bunt, move runners along second. And I just think a lot of that goes back to forever the game, the pitcher batted ninth. But I think as time has gone along, and I saw the Atlanta Braves, when they started hitting Ronald Acuna first. And we've started figuring out maximize the at-bats for your best players. So, now 1 through 9, you don't have that pitcher hitting ninth. So what you are seeing with most teams is you've got your 3 best hitters hitting 1, 2, 3. You're guaranteeing they hit in the first inning, and you're getting them more plate appearances there. So I think that's going to be a big thing for Georgia too, kind of figuring out who those guys are. But that's definitely, for me, when I've seen baseball change throughout my lifetime, and I've loved it my whole life, I'm about to be 52. That to me is one of the biggest changes that I think has been a smart move for teams. That traditionally, you might want to have your best hitters 3, 4, 5, moving those guys up in the lineup.
Yeah, Georgia certainly maximized that with Collins and Condon. It seemed like those guys were at the plate 6 times every game.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yet if you're good 1 through 9, you just feel like they're cycling through more. I feel like when the Atlanta Braves won the World Series in 2021, when they got hot and it looked like they were going to be a contender. And I mean, Graham can tell you, broadcasting for Ole Miss, from September through June, I'm just in the Georgia vortex. So everything out, it's kind of from a mile high view. But just when I would watch the Atlanta Braves play, I thought, the thing about them, 1 through 9, everybody in that lineup can hit the ball out of the ballpark. And when you got a lineup that can do that, that causes a severe amount of stress to the opposing pitching staff when you can't catch your breath in the bottom of the order. And I think, and you guys see it in the SEC, sure enough, right as rain. If 7, 8, 9 or 8, 9 and 1 is due up, 9, 1 and 2, if somebody from the bottom of the order gets on, that run expectancy rate is going through the roof. And a lot of times that's what starts the big inning. And I'll even tell you, for NC State, who beat us in the Super Regional in the first game, they killed us. I think it was 18-1. They had an 11 or 12 run inning. and their 1 through 5 was electric. But sure enough, it started. I think they had 6, 7, and 8 all reached, and we're just sitting there going, "Oh boy, here we go!" And sure enough, it was a big inning. But yeah, I think now that 1 through 9 and what we've seen too, guys, the COVID effect, the red shirt rule, guys with extra years of eligibility, all these older teams, these lineups are just, to me, deeper than they've ever been, and it especially showed last year in what was really an offensive year, just for a variety of reasons. The pitching numbers were way up or down, depending if you want to look at ERA, across the board last season.
Yeah, and Georgia just was able to hit up into the 7, 8, 9 spots last year, which made them doubly tough. But by the way, also a Braves fan. We won't talk about how that's going right now. I've never seen a team as
the
injury plagued as it's awful.
I mean, you think if you got Acuna, Albies, Fried, and Strider, you can build a World Series team off those 4 guys alone. But the deal is, Arizona won 84 games last year and made the World Series. You just got to get in. I do think if they make the playoffs, if Fried's healthy, I mean, if Fried, Sale, Lopez, they got a chance.
Yeah, Morton too. But yeah, I'm with you. I just think let's just get there and get to the wild card and see if you can get your dudes back. But yeah, Georgia's issues have been more in the pitching. I know some of that's been health. I think Goldstein, was hurt a lot of last year. Did I see he's coming back?
He is. He got an extra year, and we lost Goldstein. He against Vanderbilt back, I think it was week 7. He was dealing, and he got hurt.
Middle of the inning.
Yep, he sure did, and he was really throwing great. And he came back, and he threw a couple of times. He got hurt. He faced one batter against Tech in the regional. And that was a big blow for us. We've got a short porch at Foley Field out to right. And NC State had a very lefty, strong power lineup, and they took advantage of it. And I hate it. My wife says sometimes I'm annoyingly right. But I just remember before the NCAA tournament started, I said, well, best case scenario, we got to win 5 games, maybe 6, say 5 games to make it to Omaha. So we're going to have Goldstein win 1 for us. And I really think not having him, because we just really didn't have any left-handed pitching, and just not having him for that NC State series, that was, it was so tight there in that last game. That was such a difference. But if he can come back and be healthy, I feel really good about the pitching. Guys like Leighton Finley and Colton Smith coming back, and Wes is an excellent pitching coach. So, usually stuff's cyclical. I would imagine, maybe it's more of a pitcher's year next year in college baseball. But just to give y'all an insight, we've got at Georgia a very sharp young analyst that I like to lean on and talk shop with, a young guy named John Fitzpatrick. And we're just kind of talking numbers. He's one of these young guys I always joke. I go, this guy's a GA now. He's going to be like the general manager of the Colorado Rockies when he's 35 or something. But he was telling me, kind of looking at the numbers and the analytics, the guys that really crunch them, they felt like last year a 4.40 ERA was comparable to a 3.00 ERA in most years, just for a variety of reasons. Now, I think in the majors this year, it's more of a pitching year. Things happen, but so that I thought that was some really good insight. So, what your normal measure of a successful pitching performance might be, last year you just had to scale and equate that a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt.
Jeff,
Graham?
last thing for me, you mentioned Foley Field, $45 million renovation. Just what's the latest on that, and just how excited are you for that when it's completed?
Well, one of our great donors, Frank Beltran, and his wife Carol, that's who our radio booth is named for there. He brought us a fridge up last year for our radio booth, which was nice, as we kind of go to Tommy Boy for sodas and things like that. So I'm hopeful that, maybe we can get, for those cold games, maybe get a hot tub put in there, and, maybe a cool zone fan for the hot games late in the year. But there's going to be more of the premium seating for sure, more seats. The big thing to me, our right field area has really been a great untapped resource for us. Josh Brooks, our athletic director, is just tremendous. He's got a great vision, and his background was in facilities. I really like what Tennessee has done in left field, where they've got the 3 tiers with kind of the high tops and the umbrellas. And I think we might do a version of that and some standing room only out and right. I really like what Florida's done, having those grassy areas down the right and left field line, because I just think, and just the way we are now, everybody's on their phone all the time, that, just for somebody to sit in the seat for 3.5 hours is a big ask. So I think the standing room only, more room to mill around. I think the more of that you have, the better. But, we're not going to be the biggest stadium, of course, but Josh's goal and Wes's goal is for it to be the nicest.
Yeah, Jeff, my last thing, I guess I'll build off that a little. Wes Johnson got extended. This is about a month ago through 2030, obviously. And you saw we've kind of talked about it while you've been on here the whole time. The buzz around the program is getting bigger and bigger based off this season and what Charlie Condon did for the team and stuff like that. I have a lot of friends, freshly graduated from Tennessee. I have a lot of friends at Georgia who, just all of a sudden started liking baseball a ton more and were way more locked into it. And you saw, speaking of being on your phone all the time, I just saw videos from the regional of all the college students out in right field having a blast, and just everyone really in the ballpark having a blast. What would you say, going forward, how much bigger this program's going to get and how much more engaged people are with Wes Johnson staying for a long time and just the amount of talent coming to Georgia being immense?
Well, I think the program's got tremendous potential, but every program in the league does. And I was doing a show with a friend of mine from Knoxville, and it was kind of like, well, Georgia is sleeping. I go, all right, let me just run through this. The South Carolina fans think they should win big every year. Yes. The Florida fans, yes. Now Tennessee fans do. Vandy fans do. Georgia fans do. Kentucky just went to Omaha. Auburn fans do. Bama fans do. You get where I'm going with this. Now Texas and Oklahoma are coming in. The math is not there for everybody to win big every year. So you definitely feel like you got to cash in. And if you can just more often than not, find your way into the NCAA tournament. I think it was, what did we get, 11 in this year? Is that right? So I think that's a good number there. I'm hoping the big problem we've had is just trying to figure out this SEC tournament, which is just an albatross. To me, it's done through the years much more harm than good. I don't like the event. It can grind teams up. That definitely happened to Tennessee in 2022. I know they won it this year, but it happened to Arkansas when they pulled off the double. So I think now just maybe going to that single elimination, maybe that'll help us get 11, 12 teams in regularly. But it's just very tough. And I think at a lot of schools, it hit me back in the 00s. When you think about, if you have a good football season, you played a New Year's Day before the playoffs, bear with me, the basketball hit or miss in a lot of places, but at schools like Ole Miss and State and LSU, Arkansas out west, where it was so popular, that baseball to me had topped basketball as the second most popular sport. And I remember when LSU, you had mentioned them kind of having some downtime in basketball. If you're an LSU fan when the football program's going great, I was like, well, you got, major bowl game, watch a little hoops, signing day, and then it's opening day in the middle of February. So there's really not that much of a gap now. So I just think the popularity of the game, and I'm just telling you, Tennessee, I remember a couple of years ago, I flipped on the plus one of their games. It's a midweek game against Western Carolina. They had 4,000 people there. I'm telling you, we played up there 15 years ago for a Georgia-Tennessee. They wouldn't have 600 people for an SEC game. So it's getting huge. When the NCAA made the decision to go to the regionals and super regionals back in, I think it was 1999, you made for better instead of having the 8 6-team regionals, you had the 4 and then the 2 that doubled the amount of events that were on campus. Everybody's pitching wasn't dead at that point. College, it's late May, early June. It's baseball season. These are games that mean something, compared to, say, just game number 50 out of 162 if you're a Braves fan or a Yankees fan. And everybody's starting to Jones for football, so you can watch things like LSU versus North Carolina. Say if LSU versus Kentucky, Ole Miss playing Texas A&M, you can watch things like that. And I just think it has done a great job of driving the popularity of the sport. And we need to keep it on a good track.
Jeff, I'll get our last one here. I think one of the great tragedies I've seen in baseball was 2020, us getting robbed of that season. And I think that would have been a super interesting year. I think Vanderbilt had maybe the most talented pitching staff I've ever seen. Didn't hit much, but I think they would have been tough. I think Tennessee, now that we kind of know what Tennessee's become, Tennessee was off to a hot start that year. Who knows what that would have been. But I think Georgia was the team that I think a lot of people's eyes were on when that ended. I remember that. I don't remember that whole roster, but I think Emerson Hancock's on it, who I think has been up maybe with the Mariners this year.
Yes.
And I think they had a couple more studs in that pitching staff. Cole Wilcox. Yeah, they had – that was a team – it wasn't last year's Georgia team with hitting, but that was a really good team and probably a top 5 team. I'm just curious. You never know because it's baseball. But what could that have looked like for Georgia if that season had played out?
I think in the postseason we'd have had a chance. I don't think the team was as good as our teams in 18 or 19. They also had Aaron Shunk, who's up in the big leagues now. Cam Shepard was on all those teams. But, I think that team would have had a shot. And you're right. That was the SEC's always good. I mean, what is it now? What have we had? 5 of the last 6 World Series, had 5 different national champions. But, I think that year because Florida was loaded. Vandy, as you said, Tennessee was going to shocker. LSU was really good. So that really, really was a great tragedy. And it was just heartbreaking. I'm so glad we've moved past that. And I think all the COVID eligibility years have finally just about run out because now we can get back to calling guys freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors again.
Yeah, that was the other part of that's become a pain. But Jeff, it's been a lot of fun. Your office, I know we got to see the whole thing that the viewers did. You've got the best backdrop of any guest we've had on any of our shows at this point. So that
I
was
appreciate
well done,
it. Well,
sir.
with my Georgia Bulldogs and Masters stuff in here, it's my wife calls it a museum.
I get the same grief from my wife on my space behind me too. But in any case, hey, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you on again, and best of luck to you in your off season.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, guys. And Graham Doty, that's my guy. I'm telling you, I keep him out of trouble at that SEC women's tournament on the
road.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks to Jeff Dantzler for joining us today.
Chris had to go run. He had to do a radio hit, so Alfred and I will wrap this one up. But Alfred, transfer portal, kind of have a better idea of what everybody's roster will look like for the upcoming season. Still, a few more days for it to be 100% completed. But when you glance at everything around the conference, what are things that jumped out to you as far as the transfer portal around the league?
Yeah, a lot of, like I said, in the beginning, we had the MLB draft last week, so we didn't cover it all. There's been a lot of moves since then. I'll go over ones that stood out, but a reminder, everyone watching, obviously we could sit here for 5 hours talking about moves that were made with all of them. So if you want to know all of them, go look it up online. You can find them pretty easy like I do. But ones that stood out, a few guys returning to their respective teams. That was nice to see, and these teams would love. Will McIntyre coming back to Arkansas is the first one. That's a big-time pitching arm. Has a chance to be probably their biggest pitching arm with Hagen Smith leaving for next year. Hunter Ensley coming back at Tennessee in center field. He's going to be a leader on that team. We saw what he could do with his bat. Of course, had that iconic slide to win the national title, and that's a big return for the Vols. And then a big one that happened just the other day, Ryan Prager coming back to A&M. A&M is looking very, very dangerous, Graham. I mean, now they have probably the best hitter in Lavalette returning, and then they have, I think, the best arm in college baseball as of right now returning in Prager. So 2 big-time players coming back from A&M with Prager joining the fold, and then some moves as well in College Station. Connor Harrison, catcher out of St. Mary's, he batted 300+, was an all West Coast Conference freshman this past season. Going down to Knoxville, Tennessee, picking up that big Ole Miss duo. That was a while ago, but once again, we had the draft, so we didn't cover it. Andrew Fisher and Liam Doyle joining in Knoxville. Tony Vitello is, really trying to hunt back-to-back national titles at this point with the talent he's getting and coming in. Those 2 guys will make a huge impact. Going back to A&M, we're going back and forth, College Station, Knoxville, but a move I liked for the Aggies, Jamal George is an Alabama State transfer. Really talented bat. Coming out of there, 299 average, drew a ton of walks, which if you watched A&M last year, they drew a ton of walks, and that kind of fits the fold with what they're doing and whatnot. And going down the list here, we just had Jeff on. I think Georgia's biggest move so far in the portal has been Nolan McCarthy out of Kentucky. He'll join them in center field. He talked about defensively, Georgia looking to clean things up when he was on here. I think Nolan McCarthy can clean things up in center field, at least on the defensive side. I was really impressed with what he did there in Lexington. Another Kentucky guy transferring out, Travis Smith, going to Mississippi State. That's an arm the Bulldogs gained there. Judging off of what we saw from Mississippi State, what they did with Cal Stevens, St. And even Brooks Auger, Travis Smith could become something pretty special in this league based off of that move. Another big pitching move, Florida to Auburn. Cade Fisher joins the fold in Auburn. Auburn really, is a team that kind of had a lapsed season. They really had nothing going there, down the stretch. Cade Fisher is a good way to stabilize at least the pitching rotation for them, for Butch Thompson's team. Going back up to, I'm just kind of bouncing around, but Texas landed JUCO transfer Ethan Walker. He's a lefty. Really, really good strikeout count for him. He loves to throw the sinker. He's a name to watch for Schlossnagel out in Austin. And then I guess back to College Station as well. And I just keep getting A&M stuff. They keep making these big-time moves. Miles Patton, a lefty out of Long Beach State. Really good, really talented guy. Sub-4 ERA at this point in college baseball. You'll take that. 66 and a third innings pitched, 85 strikeouts. So you want to talk about a good strikeout count. There's one right there for Patton. The biggest takeaways, I guess, I have from all these moves is it's just been, A&M and Michael Early really are loading up. I like where they're standing heading into the league next season. I think they're a top 3 team in the league and a top 3 team really in the country based off all these moves they're making. Georgia with their headline move and McCarthy. Tennessee keeps adding people, trying to build, trying to get toward another national title. Arkansas gets a huge arm back in Will McIntyre. A lot of big time moves, and I think when you look at it, the league, like I said, this signing deadline for Major League Baseball draftees is coming up August 1st. That's kind of how Prager came back. He decided not to take his deal with the Angels and come back to A&M. So a lot of more moves we'll see there, but those are the ones that stuck out to me, and there were a lot of good moves for a lot of teams around the league.
Yeah, there really are. Everything you just touched on, what comes to mind to me is just the rich get richer, and let's. Mm-hmm. I mean, you alluded to Texas A&M, but that is the reason why Coach Early was hired for the Aggies. They were already in good shape with everybody coming back, but then the Prager announcement. I mean, you're looking at him being a weekend starter, for sure, Friday, Saturday, depending on how they want to handle it. But you're right. I think they are in the driver's seat, top 3, mm-hmm. and 3 at worst, being in the SEC and in the country. So that they are in outstanding shape for the upcoming year.
They are. And you want to talk about rich getting richer. I left out these guys too. I said it, I think 2 shows ago. I've been totally impressed, Graham, with what Paul Maneri's done so far in Columbia, considering he came back into the sport back when there was at least the transfer portal was not at all what it is now in 2024. He is kind of, paving the way for the Gamecocks. They bring in a catcher, Max Coffer, who was at A&M. He was the backup, I think, to Appel for most of the season there, but he's a guy, obviously they have to replace Cole Messina, and Coffer has a chance to do that. And then Henry Kazmar from Ohio State comes in as well. I mean, they're adding names too. And South Carolina, add anyone in the SEC, they're probably one of the most invested in their baseball program. All these schools are. But the history of South Carolina with Ray Tanner, and that's still in the shadow of what they do with baseball. And Maneri's really putting that together nicely. Obviously, rich get richer. Tennessee's an epitome of that with the NIL support they have. And at this point, Tony Vitello is going to be extended there really for quite a long time. It's quite cool to see, because the talent here is still going to be there next year. And it's a lot of guys bouncing within the league and staying at their own respective schools.
Yeah, that's just the new norm, for sure. I mean, I've touched on it, like Andrew Fisher, who you mentioned a moment ago. He's looking at 3 different schools in 3 years: Duke,
Hmm.
Ole Miss, and Tennessee. And he's going to Tennessee. He will more than likely be their everyday starter at third baseman. It's a guy that
Yeah.
hit almost 300 last year and hit 20 home runs, so he will fit right in with that Tennessee offense and what they like to do. The other one you mentioned, Liam Doyle. Doyle chance to be probably either the Saturday or Sunday guy for Tennessee, just depending on how everything shakes out for fall ball for them. Doyle, you look at his numbers; they're not really eye popping. ERA around 5, but he was really good against the big competition in his starts when he was at Ole Miss. Against Tennessee, 6 innings, gave up 3 runs. Against Texas A&M, same thing, 6 innings, just a couple runs. So he's a guy against elite competition. He brings his A game, and he's a big energy guy on the mound, and teams feed off that, and especially when he's at Tennessee as well. Other thing I want to mention, you mentioned the transfer of Ohio State to South Carolina. The only reason why everything is not 100% completed yet is because teams that have coaching changes, Ohio State being one of them, their
Hmm.
window is a little bit longer for the transfer portal. So programs like Liberty, who just recently lost their head coach, Campbell, and Ohio State, those players are really still in the market, and they have, you know, a little bit more time period to advance and go wherever they want to go to. So that's other than that,
Gotcha.
everything, especially in the SEC, is pretty much sealed for the roster for the upcoming season. Anything else transfer portal wise that stands out to you that you want to hit and touch on?
No, again, check out, obviously I didn't touch every team in the SEC, but some other moves were made as well. You can go check out online, and we have until August 1st. I'm sure next week we'll come in and cover, even more moves that are made, because these guys have to make the decision on either at least, professional minor league baseball or coming back to school and sort of building up, what you're doing in college. So keep an eye out for that. And we still have just a little bit more time, of people deciding where they're going to end up. And I think, we're going to come back here next week, and I'm going to have another slew of names to go over
No
to
doubt.
see where they end up.
Well, as we're recording this in late July, so 64 Analytics, which I like a lot, their top 10 transfer portal classes, 8 of them are SEC programs. It's
It's
Arkansas.
phenomenal.
Yeah, Arkansas is number 1, followed by LSU, Georgia, Mississippi State 4th. The only programs that are in the top 10 that aren't SEC, Wake Forest comes in at the 5 spot. No surprise. They've had a really strong program the last handful of years. What did surprise me, though, Kansas comes in at number 6 in the top 10 for
Wow.
transfer portal. And that's a new look Big Ten. So Kansas, it'll be interesting to see what they look like next year in the brand new Big 12. Kentucky cracks the top 10, Auburn, Texas, and then A&M rounds out the top 10. So just kind of what you're alluding to. No surprise at all with 8 SEC teams in the top 10 in the transfer portal.
They run the sport. That's phenomenal. Shocked by Kansas too. Kansas will be interesting to see. The Big 12 obviously has some talent there. Arkansas, it's very good to see. I'll touch on them for a sec too, because I mentioned Will McIntyre coming back, but moves they've made, it's very obvious that they're getting to a point where it's like, we got to keep cracking at this with Dave Van Horn, because the national title is coming at some point. And shout out to them for sort of making their way through this portal very nicely with the rest of them. Not that wasn't expected. I mean, Arkansas has, loved baseball for the longest time at this point, but having them at number 1 is a good sign of things to come, especially when they have Texas and Oklahoma coming into the fold. So the Hawks will be hanging their ugly head around per usual. And I think it's really good to see, because at this point, we had Tony Vitello win his national title this past year, and then Dave Van Horn has been up, and he is now, even to term it, with Tony Vitello winning it, he's next up to win it. And I think this transfer portal definitely puts him on the right track.
I do too. And again, he's the second longest tenured head coach in the SEC, and he's just too good of a head coach. I
Mhm.
think he'll get one at some point before he hangs it up. He is 63 years old, so he's still got, a little bit more juice in the tank. And again, he is a pop fly catch away from, having a
Yeah.
championship on his resume. So he will definitely be in the mix as long as he's at Arkansas for sure. Other things we want to touch on more and more when you look across the country and just different tournaments to kick off the season next year, late February, that kind of thing. There are two different tournaments, both in the state of Texas, that have been announced as far as like who is playing in these tournaments. One of them is the Frisco Classic Tournament field, which will be February 28th and will conclude on March the 2nd. And the tournament field for that one loaded with a bunch of very good programs. LSU probably the headliner, Nebraska in there as well, Kansas State, and Sam Houston State. That's the Sam Houston State team, which will be in Conference USA. I believe that'll be their second season in Conference USA. But these tournaments, always a cool thing. Would you see just top programs from all over the country? And no surprise here, the Frisco Classic Tournament field, we'll see a lot of good teams headlined by LSU.
Yeah, and the thing I love too, and this has always been the case, but it continues to be this year. The other tournaments we touched on, earlier in our weekly shows had the same, sort of moral to it. There's teams outside of the SEC here who were very competitive and made the tournament and made some runs at it. Kansas State, obviously, being one of them. You even had Nebraska, who was in the Stillwater Regional, and they played Florida. I can't remember the other team, but it was Florida, obviously, Oklahoma State in there, and they bring in a talented team pretty much on a routine basis. Sam Houston State produced Walker Janik, who is a really good catcher prospect in this year's MLB Draft. They were a competitive team this year. LSU's obviously the headliner, and people from Baton Rouge would want to flock to Frisco for that if they can. But, the other teams in this as well, Kansas State, Nebraska, Sam Houston, it provides a good challenge for LSU, at least to start the season heading into this. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is, it's not like college football kind of fell victim to this sometimes in years past where, some of these top schools would play a mid-major to start their season. And college baseball, that's almost not the case with this. It's, you go to a neutral site somewhere in the state of Texas for the most part, and you duke it out with, pretty good teams around the country. And it's wonderful. Yeah. And Frisco is no exception to this at all.
No, not at all. The other tournament in Texas, it's the Round Rock Classic. Round Rock, the minor league team there is named after Nolan Ryan, the Express. So they've done a great job over the years of hosting a tournament as well. That field announced as well. Really, really talented baseball programs in this one as well. Oregon State, again, this will be their first time. They're not members of the Pac-12. I guess they're calling it the Pac-2. They are in it. Virginia in and out of the ACC. Virginia's won a national championship within the past decade. Oklahoma, their first year in the SEC. This is how they will kick off their season. And then a Minnesota Golden Gophers out of the Big Ten. So all major programs and what should be another excellent tournament with a new fresh face in the SEC in there in Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's like we talked about Frisco being good. This is phenomenal. I mean, Oregon State obviously has a case to be one of, if not the best college baseball program that's been around for the sport's history. You have Virginia, which is constantly, Virginia, is a national title team from within this decade, if you go back. And then you have Minnesota as well, getting in there in the mix with Oklahoma, duking it out. That's a kind of pick from the pot with who you think will come out of there with the most wins. Very good job by Round Rock getting those teams in. Maybe as a case for one of, if not the best or the most evenly matched field in all these invitational tournaments, and that's really cool to see. We'll get a good feel for what Oklahoma's about at the beginning of the year, as they might face, either Virginia or Oregon State to start the season. Two really good, two at least top 25 teams heading into next year, that they're playing, which is nice to see.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a Virginia team. They hosted a regional this past season. They were the ones that eliminated Mississippi State and then Oregon State again. They've won multiple national
Mhm.
championships. So good test right out of the gates for Oklahoma. Kick off the season that way, and then you get rewarded by playing everybody in the SEC. So welcome to the SEC, Oklahoma, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Skip Johnson has his work cut out for him there, to say the least. But hey, you join in with the big dogs, you have to get tested, and that's what they're gonna do. And it's good. I think they should look forward to it, because if you start out the season with a win over Oregon State or Virginia, obviously you haven't through June in Omaha until the season's over, but that bodes pretty well, at least to start your season, if you could do that. And the morale in that Oklahoma dugout would be really high.
Yeah, no doubt. So that is it as far as the up to date as far as tournaments go. The tournaments in Round Rock, Texas, and Frisco, Texas. When more tournaments get announced and the teams, and then we'll keep you up to date with that. But that will be it for us today. Again, want to give a big thank you to the voice of Georgia baseball, Jeff Dantzler, for joining us, as well as Chris Lee, as always, and for Alfred Ezman, Graham Doty signing off. Until next time, thanks for being with us.